There's a certain kind of night that never quite lets you go under. New sheets, an unfamiliar hum from somewhere in the walls, a stranger's ceiling in the dark. Somewhere around 2 a.m., they give up trying to sleep and just lie there, listening. Most people call this jet lag, or too much coffee before bed, or just being a light sleeper. But the truth is far stranger than any of that. Your brain does something on that first night that it does almost nowhere else. It splits itself in half. One side goes to sleep. The other stays on duty, like a night watchman who never clocked out. You don't feel it happen. You just feel the result. Tired, restless, awake for reasons you can't explain. Why would a brain do this to itself on the one night you need rest the most? In 2016, researchers at Brown University set out to answer exactly that. Masako Tamaki and Yuka Sasaki brought volunteers into a sleep lab not once but twice a week apart. They measured brain activity with electroencephalography, magnetoencephalography, and MRI, layering 3 separate methods on top of each other so nothing could hide. On the first night, something showed up that hadn't been clearly documented in humans before. The left hemisphere of the brain stayed noticeably more active during deep sleep than the right. Not by a small margin, by 20 to 30%. One side of the brain was resting, the other was, in a very real sense, keeping watch. To understand why that matters, you have to know what deep sleep is supposed to look like. Normally, both hemispheres drop into slow-wave sleep together, matched almost perfectly, like two halves of the same machine idling in sync. Slow-wave sleep is the deepest, most restorative stage your brain reaches, the stage where the body repairs tissue and the mind consolidates memory. It's supposed to be symmetrical. It's supposed to be quiet on both sides at once. On a first night in an unfamiliar place, it simply isn't. One hemisphere idles down the way it should. The other holds back, like a guard refusing to fully sit down even when told to rest. The team didn't stop at watching brainwaves. They wanted to know if that watchful hemisphere was actually doing something useful. So during sleep, they played random beeping tones into each ear. On the first night, the left hemisphere responded to the odd sounds faster than the right. It reacted like a guard reacting to footsteps. By the second night, in the same room, with the same bed, that asymmetry disappeared completely. Both hemispheres settled down together. The watchman went off duty because the environment had finally been marked safe. Here's the part that reframes everything. This isn't a flaw, it isn't insomnia, and it isn't anxiety, even though it feels exactly like both. It's a feature that showed up long before humans had beds, hotels, or houses at all. To understand where it comes from, you have to leave the sleep lab and go outside, to a river, to a line of mallard ducks resting at the water's edge. In 1999, biologist Niels Rattenborg noticed something odd while filming ducks for an unrelated study. The birds on the outside edge of the group slept with one eye open. Just one. And the eye that stayed open was always the one facing away from the flock, toward open water, toward wherever a predator might come from. Rattenborg, working with Stephen Lima and Charles Amlaner, confirmed it in the lab. Ducks on the exposed ends of a row spent far more time in what's called unihemispheric sleep, one half of the brain resting, the other half awake and alert, than ducks tucked safely in the middle. The exposed ducks weren't paranoid. They were doing math. Fewer neighbors meant more risk, and more risk meant less of the brain was allowed to fully switch off. Dolphins do a version of this too, so do seals. An entire hemisphere stays awake so the animal can keep breathing, keep swimming, keep one eye on the water above. It's not rare in nature. It's closer to the default setting for any creature that sleeps somewhere it hasn't fully mapped for danger. Now step back further, long before hotels, long before houses, long before there was ever a roof over a human head. For most of human history, sleep didn't happen behind a locked door. It happened in the open, or close to it, in shelters that could be entered, in camps that shifted from one unfamiliar clearing to the next. A new sleeping site meant new sounds, new shadows, new directions a threat could come from. There was no evolutionary reason to trust an unfamiliar space on the first night. The bodies that survived long enough to pass on their genes were, on some level, the cautious ones. the ones whose brains refuse to fully stand down in an unmapped place. You inherited that caution. You just inherited it wearing pajamas instead of animal hide, in a room with a lock on the door and a phone charging on the nightstand. Which means the traveler tossing and turning in a hotel room isn't broken. Their brain didn't malfunction the moment the lights went off. It did what a mallard duck does at the edge of the group. It ran a threat check on the room, found the exits unfamiliar and the sounds unlabeled, and quietly assigned part of itself to stay on watch. You are not overreacting to a strange bed. You are running software that kept your ancestors alive. Here's the twist most people miss because it flips the whole story on its head. You'd expect this system to protect you. It was built to. But in a modern bedroom, that ancient watchman has nothing real to guard against, and it doesn't know that. There's no predator circling the hotel corridor. There's only an ice machine 2 rooms down, headlights sweeping across the ceiling, someone's footsteps in the hallway at midnight. Your night watchman treats every one of them as a potential threat anyway, because it has no way to tell the difference between a real danger and a stranger's floor plan. The exact mechanism that once separated the sleeping from the eaten is now the same mechanism keeping you scrolling your phone at 3 a.m. in an Airbnb, wide awake for no reason you can point to. Bjorn Rasch, a sleep psychologist at the University of Fribourg, who has spent years studying exactly this kind of unfamiliar environment sleep disruption, points out that this pattern is so consistent that sleep labs plan around it. Researchers usually throw out data from a subject's first night entirely and call it an adaptation night, because they already know it won't reflect how that person actually sleeps. Think about that for a moment. Scientists who study sleep for a living don't even trust your first night in their own lab, a room they built specifically for resting. They assume before you even lie down that half your brain will refuse to cooperate. The scientists studying you have quietly agreed to stop pretending your first night means anything. Maybe it's time you agreed too. This is also why the effect fades so quickly once it isn't needed anymore. Give that same brain a second night in the exact same room, and the asymmetry vanishes almost entirely. Nothing about the room changed. The mattress didn't get softer. The noise outside didn't stop. What changed was information. The Watchman hemisphere had a full night of data now, a catalog of exactly which sounds mean nothing and which direction the door actually is. Once a place has been marked safe, your brain lets it go. The vigilance was never really about the room. It was about the unknown, and the unknown only lasts exactly one night. Think about how often this shows up in your own life without you ever naming it. The first night in a new apartment, after the boxes are half unpacked and the furniture is in the wrong spot. The first night in a dorm room, a hospital bed, a friend's guest room. The first night after a breakup, in a bed that's suddenly only half as full but somehow feels twice as loud. The first night of a camping trip, when every rustle outside the tent sounds like something walking closer. Each time, some part of you runs the same ancient check. New space, unknown exits, unfamiliar sounds. Stay alert, just in case. Even the second night gives it away. Notice how the same hotel room, the same guest bed, the same tent, feels almost boring by night 2. Not because you're more tired, because your watchman finally clocked out. The room passed inspection. Nothing in it turned out to be dangerous. That's the whole trade. One rough night in exchange for every night after it feeling safe. You've felt this 100 times and never known it had a name, let alone a hemisphere assigned to it. And once you know the name, the whole experience changes shape. You're not failing at sleep. You're not weak or overly anxious or cursed with insomnia the moment you leave your own bed. You're running the same program a duck runs at the edge of a pond, the same one a dolphin runs while it sleeps with half its brain so it can still breathe. Your body isn't sabotaging you. It's protecting you from a threat that, this time, doesn't exist. So the next time you're lying in an unfamiliar room, listening to a stranger's pipes creak and a stranger's traffic hum outside, you don't have to fight it or panic about it. You can simply notice it. Half of your brain is standing guard, the way it has for longer than there have been hotels, longer than there have been beds, longer than there have been humans lying awake wondering what's up. Nothing is wrong with you. Somewhere behind your eyes, an old watchman just clocked in for one more shift. The same one that never quite lets you go under on the first night, whether you understand why or not.